Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Keely Denenberg. I'm Senior VP of Client Solutions at Orange Grove Consulting, and I am joined today by Dr. Jody Detjen, Managing Partner at Orange Grove Consulting. Hi, Jody.
Howdy.
So, you and I have talked recently about leading through uncertainty and given advice to leaders in managing their teams through this uncertain period of time. And we know that change is inevitable both now and in general. So, as organizations think about upcoming changes that they will be integrating, how should they start thinking about that?
I think the most important thing about change is, yeah, okay, we know right now change is just ubiquitous. We're always changing and strategy is uncertain. But I think what ends up happening is for people's organizations is that there's a lot of uncertainty in the organization. And if people are unclear of the direction, it creates a lot of anxiety. And then that anxiety creates spin, which creates inefficiency and lack of productivity and lower results. So one of the most important things, and really the first step of change, is to understand what you're changing to. So it's not just a, whoa, gut reaction, what do I do? It's a more strategic view as to what is the problem and how are we going to solve it. And typically this is going to be done at multiple levels. So for example, it could be where you're saying, okay, we want to bring more of our work onshore to the United States. Well, that decision at the upper level needs to be made first before you can start going down to the more granular levels to understand what does that actually mean, which processes, where, when, how. Those questions cannot be answered until you've made that first strategic decision. And so the strategic certainty is where leaders really have a responsibility to define. And you can define that strategic certainty in a year time frame. So you can say in the next year, this is what we're focusing on. You can define it in a longer term. You can say this is the way we're moving. Whatever you do, however you frame it, the key is that you're providing a boundary, you're providing a framework, a guidance so that people understand where they are going. That is the number one most important step for any type of change in managing in times of uncertainty.
And once that is in place, then what would be the general kind of next steps for organizations?
So then we start doing the change management process itself. And so I'm a huge fan of change management as a discipline. So what does that mean? That means a lot of times what ends up happening is people make a change and then they just expect because they've done a switch, it goes on and nothing has to happen. So I'll give you an example. Um, this one company that we've done some work with, they've implemented a system, and they did this before we started working with them. They implemented the system, and what they did was, so their overarching goal was automation of some of this particular process area. And so they bought a system to do it. But then what they did was they basically said, let's take all the processes that exist and just put it into the new system. So you just slam it into the new system. Didn't really do much around the change management piece. Nobody really knew what was going on. That's not the way you do it. The way you do it is really, I love the Kotter's 8 steps because I think the Kotter's 8 steps is a simple way to think about change management. But what it also tells us is that change management is a process. And processes are things that can be managed. Doesn't mean you have 100% certainty, but it means that if you follow through and you think through change systematically, you are going to increase the probability of your success. We know that right now, this is actually research that's been done consistently over the last decade. The most change processes, change management aspects only yield about an 80% or have an 80% failure rate. That means 80% of the time in change, they fail to yield the outcomes that they sought out. And we'll talk more in another video about the 8 steps, but I think the key message here is provide that strategic certainty in some kind of a time box frame, and then know that it requires a change management approach to implement it successfully.
My takeaway from this is when it comes to change management, if you fail to plan, then you plan to fail.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, great. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. Check back for additional videos on change management.